Bullied teen helps injured stranger, never suspecting he'd inherit the man's vast fortune. These words would later be printed in newspaper headlines across the city. But on that rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon in October, Eli Parker was just trying to survive another day. The 16-year-old hunched his shoulders against the downpour, his worn backpack offering little protection from the elements. Each raindrop felt like another small defeat in a life that had become a gauntlet of them. His left eye still throbbed from yesterday's encounter with Jason Wheeler and his crew, the school's self-appointed tormentors who had made Eli their favorite project since freshman year. Freak, they called him. Charity case. And worse, all because he wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, because his jeans were always an inch too short, because his mother worked double shifts at the diner to keep their apartment after his father left 5 years ago, because he preferred books to basketball and carried a sketchbook everywhere he went. Today had been no different. Except today, they'd torn pages from his sketchbook. 6 months of work scattered across puddles in the school parking lot. Eli had gathered what he could salvage, the paper dissolving between his trembling fingers. He cut through Westside Park on his way home, taking the longer route to avoid any chance of running into Wheeler's crew again. The rain had cleared most people from the normally busy paths, leaving only the occasional jogger hurrying for shelter. That's when he heard it, a groan, barely audible over the patter of raindrops on leaves. Eli stopped. The sound came again. In the gathering dusk, he spotted a figure slumped on a bench beneath a massive oak tree. An elderly man in an expensive-looking suit, now soaked through, clutched at his chest, his face contorted in pain. Every instinct told Eli to keep walking, to hurry home where his mother would be wondering where he was, to not get involved. But something, perhaps the memory of his grandfather, who died of a heart attack when no one was around to help, made him approach instead. "Sir, are you okay?" Eli's voice cracked as he drew closer. The man's eyes fluttered open, cloudy blue irises struggling to focus. His silver hair was plastered to his forehead, and despite the expensive cut of his clothes, there was something deeply vulnerable about him now. I need..." The man wheezed, then winced sharply. Eli dropped his backpack and pulled out his phone with rain-slicked fingers. "I'm calling an ambulance." While he spoke to the emergency dispatcher, Eli shrugged off his jacket, his only protection against the rain, and draped it over the man's shoulders. It wasn't much, just a threadbare denim thing his mother had found at a thrift store, but it was something. "They're coming," Eli said, sitting beside the man. "Just hold on, okay?" The man nodded weakly, his breathing labored. Up close, Eli could see he was older than he'd first thought, perhaps in his 70s, with deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. Despite his obvious pain, there was something dignified in his bearing. "What's your name, young man?" The stranger managed between shallow breaths. Eli Parker." "Eli," the man repeated as though testing the name. "I'm Harrison Wells." Eli nodded, unsure what else to say. He noticed the man's elegant leather shoes were scuffed, one shoelace untied. Something about that small imperfection in the otherwise immaculate appearance made Harrison seem suddenly human. "Don't suppose you'd stay with me?" Harrison asked, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "Until they come?" In that moment, Eli saw past the expensive suit and the signs of wealth. He saw only another human being, afraid and in pain, someone who didn't want to be alone. "I'm not going anywhere," Eli promised, and he didn't. Not when the rain soaked through his thin t-shirt, not when his mother texted asking where he was, not when the ambulance finally arrived, sirens wailing through the darkened park. As paramedics loaded Harrison onto a stretcher, the older man gripped Eli's wrist with surprising strength. "My wallet," Harrison said urgently. "Inside pocket. Take my card, please." Confused but unwilling to argue with a man possibly having a heart attack, Eli carefully retrieved a sleek business card from the wallet a paramedic handed him. "Harrison Wells, CEO, Wells Innovations." It read in understated silver lettering. "Call that number tomorrow," Harrison said as they prepared to load him into the ambulance. "Please." "I will," Eli promised, though he wasn't entirely sure he meant it. What business would someone like him have with a CEO? "Your jacket," Harrison called weakly as they began to close the ambulance doors. Eli shook his head. "Keep it for now." Only after the ambulance disappeared into the rainy evening did Eli realize he was shivering, his clothes plastered to his skin. The business card felt impossibly heavy in his pocket as he trudged the remaining mile home. He never expected to see Harrison Wells again. He certainly never expected the man would change his life forever. "Where were you?" his mother asked the moment he stepped through the door of their small apartment. Lisa Parker's face was lined with exhaustion, her waitress uniform still on, though her shift had ended hours ago. She'd been folding laundry at their tiny kitchen table, mostly her uniforms and his few clothes. "Sorry, Mom. There was this man in the park. He was having some kind of attack. I waited with him until the ambulance came." Eli peeled off his wet shirt, leaving a puddle on the worn linoleum. His mother's expression softened immediately. "Oh, honey, is he going to be okay?" "I don't know," Eli admitted, suddenly feeling the weight of the day crash down on him. "I hope so." Lisa crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her son, ignoring his wet state. "You're a good boy, Eli. Too good for this world sometimes." Eli let himself lean into her embrace for a moment, taking comfort in the familiar scent of diner coffee and the drugstore perfume she'd worn since he was small. "Your eye looks worse," she said, pulling back to examine the bruise that had darkened since morning. "Those boys again?" Eli looked away, but his silence was answer enough. Lisa's face hardened. "I'm calling the principal tomorrow. This has gone too far." "Mom, don't. It'll just make it worse." Eli had been through this cycle before. Complaints to the school only seemed to fuel Wheeler's determination to make his life miserable. "Then what? We just let them keep hurting you?" Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the helplessness beneath her anger. Eli had no answer. Instead, he pulled the sodden remains of his sketchbook from his backpack, setting the warped pages carefully on the counter to dry. His mother's eyes filled with tears when she saw the ruined drawings. Art was Eli's escape, his one refuge. They both knew he couldn't afford to replace the specialized paper and pencils he'd saved months to buy. "Go get changed," she said finally. "I'll make some hot chocolate." Later, sitting at their kitchen table with steaming mugs between them, Eli finally showed his mother the business card. "He asked me to call him tomorrow," Eli explained, turning the expensive card over in his fingers. Lisa studied it with a frown. "Wells Innovations? That's that big tech company down by the waterfront, isn't it?" Eli nodded. "I looked it up online. They make medical devices, sustainable energy solutions, all kinds of stuff." "The man Harrison, he's the founder and CEO." His mother's eyebrows shot up. "And he just happened to be sitting alone in a park during a rainstorm? Maybe he was taking a walk and got sick," Eli suggested, though it had struck him as odd too. "The company headquarters wasn't anywhere near Westside Park." "Well," Lisa said carefully, "if you want to call him, that's fine. But maybe I should go with you if he wants to meet." Eli almost argued that he was 16, not 6, but the protective worry in his mother's eyes stopped him. "Okay," he agreed instead. That night, as he lay in bed listening to the continued patter of rain against his window, Eli couldn't stop thinking about Harrison Wells. There had been something in the man's eyes, a kind of profound loneliness that Eli recognized all too well. It resonated within him, like looking into a mirror decades into the future. He wondered if Harrison had made it through the night, if he had family waiting anxiously at the hospital. Somehow, Eli didn't think so. Something about the way the man had asked him to stay spoke of someone unaccustomed to having others to rely on. Sleep came fitfully, with dreams of rain and sirens and cloudy blue eyes that somehow transformed into Wheeler's mocking face, then back again. Morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the world washed clean by the previous day's downpour. Eli's black eye had bloomed into a spectacular rainbow of purple and yellow, impossible to hide. His mother frowned when she saw it over breakfast, but said nothing. He waited until 9 o'clock to make the call, fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the number on the card. "Wells Innovations, how may I direct your call?" A crisp female voice answered. My name is Eli Parker. Harrison Wells asked me to call him today." It came out sounding like a question. A pause. "One moment, please." Eli held his breath, half expecting to be dismissed. Instead, after a few seconds of hold music, a different woman's voice came on the line. "Mr. Parker? This is Margaret Delaney, Mr. Wells' executive assistant. He's asked me to send a car for you this morning, if that's convenient." Eli nearly dropped the phone. A car?" "Yes, sir. Mr. Wells is still in the hospital but has requested your presence." He was quite insistent. There was a note of curiosity in her professional tone. "Would 11 o'clock work for you?" Eli glanced at his mother, who was watching with raised eyebrows. "Can I bring my mom?" Another slight pause. "Of course. The car will accommodate both of you." After getting their address and confirming the time, Eli hung up and stared at his mother in disbelief. "He's sending a car," Eli said, the words sounding ridiculous even as he spoke them. "To take us to the hospital." Lisa looked as bewildered as he felt. "Well," she said finally, "I guess I'm calling in sick today." "The Karen Imon." The car turned out to be a sleek black town car with tinted windows and a uniformed driver who introduced himself as Thomas. Eli and his mother exchanged nervous glances as they slid into the leather back seat, both feeling painfully out of place. "Mr. Wells is at Mercy General in the cardiac unit," Thomas explained as they pulled away from their apartment building. "He had a minor heart attack, but the doctors say he's stable now." Eli felt a rush of relief. "So he's going to be okay?" Thomas met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Thanks to you, young man. The doctor said if he'd been out there much longer in that rain, things might have gone very differently." The drive to the hospital took them through parts of the city Eli rarely visited, the gleaming downtown with its financial district and luxury shops. It was like passing through another world, one where people like Wheeler's family belonged, not people like him and his mother. At the hospital, they were escorted directly to a private room on the 6th floor, bypassing the usual check-in procedures. Thomas left them at the door with a respectful nod. Eli hesitated before knocking, suddenly aware of his worn jeans and the faded t-shirt he'd chosen, one of his better ones, but still obviously secondhand. Beside him, his mother had put on her only non-uniform outfit, dark slacks and a simple blouse she wore for parent-teacher conferences. "It's going to be fine," Lisa whispered, squeezing his hand. "You did a good thing helping him." Before Eli could respond, the door opened to reveal a tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than their monthly rent. "Mr. Parker, I presume," she said, her expression unreadable. "And Mrs. Parker. I'm Margaret Delaney. We spoke on the phone. Please come in." The hospital room looked nothing like Eli had expected. More like a hotel suite than a place of recovery, it featured a sitting area with plush chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and discreet medical equipment tucked away as much as possible. Harrison Wells sat propped up in the bed, looking both better and worse than he had in the park. The unhealthy pallor was gone from his face, but without the rain and darkness to mask it, Eli could see how thin he was, how the expensive pajamas hung loosely on his frame. "Eli," Harrison said, a genuine smile warming his features. "You came. You asked me to," Eli replied simply, approaching the bed. Harrison's gaze shifted to Lisa. "And you must be Eli's mother. Thank you for allowing him to visit." "Mr. Wells," Lisa acknowledged with a polite nod. "My son was very concerned about you. Please call me Harrison." He gestured to the chairs beside his bed. "Both of you sit. Margaret, would you give us a few minutes?" The assistant looked like she might object, but then nodded curtly and left the room, closing the door behind her. How are you feeling?" Eli asked once they were seated. "Like I've been hit by a truck," Harrison admitted with a wry smile. "But alive, which is the important part." "Thanks to you," Eli shook his head. "I just called 911. Anyone would have done that." "Would they?" Harrison's blue eyes, clearer now than they had been yesterday, studied Eli intently. "I don't think so. Not everyone would stop for a stranger in the rain. Especially not," he broke off, his gaze lingering on Eli's black eye. "Especially not someone with their own problems." Harrison finished quietly. Eli shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Beside him, he could feel his mother tense slightly. "Your jacket is being cleaned," Harrison continued, changing the subject. "It should be returned to you soon." "You didn't have to do that," Eli mumbled. "Nor did you have to give it to me in the first place." Harrison leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Eli, what do you want to do with your life?" The question caught him off guard. It was the kind of thing guidance counselors asked, not CEOs in hospital beds. I like to draw, design things." "He's being modest," Lisa interjected, maternal pride momentarily overcoming her nervousness. "Eli's extraordinarily talented. He wants to study industrial design, create things that help people." Harrison's eyes lit up. "May I see your work sometime?" Eli's heart sank as he remembered his ruined sketchbook. "Most of my recent stuff got damaged yesterday before I met you." Something in his tone must have revealed more than his words because Harrison's expression sharpened. "Damaged how?" Lisa answered when Eli couldn't. "Some boys at school. They've been bullying my son for years and the school does nothing." The frustration in her voice was palpable. "Yesterday they destroyed his sketchbook. 6 months of work." Harrison's face darkened. "I see." An uncomfortable silence fell. Eli stared at his worn sneakers, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him. He hadn't wanted Harrison to know about the bullying, about how pathetic his life really was. "Eli," Harrison said finally, his voice gentler, Would you mind if I spoke with your mother alone for a moment? Margaret can show you to the cafeteria. I'm told they make a decent chocolate milkshake. Confused but somewhat relieved, Eli nodded. Harrison pressed a button, and moments later Margaret appeared to escort him out. As the door closed behind him, Eli wondered what Harrison could possibly want to discuss with his mother that he couldn't hear. The cafeteria milkshake was better than decent. It was the best Eli had ever tasted. He sat at a corner table sipping it slowly while sketching on a napkin with a pen Margaret had lent him. Without conscious thought, he found himself drawing Harrison's face as he'd first seen it in the rain. Vulnerable, yet dignified. 45 minutes passed before Margaret returned to escort him back upstairs. She glanced at his napkin sketch as they walked. "You're very talented," she remarked, the first crack in her professional facade. "Thanks," Eli mumbled, embarrassed. He crumpled the napkin and shoved it in his pocket. When they returned to the room, his mother was sitting much closer to Harrison's bed, deep in conversation. They both looked up when he entered, and Eli was startled to see his mother's eyes were red-rimmed, as though she'd been crying. "Everything okay?" he asked warily. "Yes, honey." Lisa smiled, though something in her expression seemed off. "Mr. Wells Harrison has made us an offer." Harrison straightened in his bed. "Eli, I owe you my life. The doctors confirmed that if you had found me when you did, I likely wouldn't have survived the night." Eli shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "Perhaps not. But I'd like to offer you something nonetheless." Harrison's gaze was steady, evaluating. "I understand you'll be applying to colleges next year." Eli exchanged a glance with his mother. They both knew college was a distant dream. They could barely afford rent, let alone tuition. "I'd like to offer you an internship at Wells Innovations," Harrison continued. "Paid, of course. You'd work in our design department 3 days a week after school and during summer break. We would provide transportation." Eli stared, certain he'd misheard. "But I don't have any qualifications." Harrison smiled. "Consider it a pre-college preparatory position. You'll learn more working alongside our team than in any high school class. And if things go well, there would be a college scholarship awaiting you upon graduation." The room seemed to tilt slightly. A paid internship? A potential scholarship? These things didn't happen to people like him. "Why?" The question escaped before Eli could stop it. "Why would you do this for me?" Something flickered in Harrison's eyes. A momentary vulnerability that reminded Eli of the man he'd found in the rain. "Let's just say I recognize talent and kindness when I see them," Harrison replied. "Both are rare commodities in this world, and both should be nurtured." Lisa reached for Eli's hand. "It's an incredible opportunity, honey." "There's one more thing," Harrison added. "This situation with your bullies. I'd like to help with that as well." Eli tensed. "I don't want charity." "Not charity," Harrison corrected gently. "Justice. No one should have to endure what you've been experiencing. Sometimes situations like these require resources that most people don't have access to." "He's not suggesting anything improper," Lisa clarified quickly, seeing Eli's alarmed expression. "Just some pressure in the right places to ensure the school takes appropriate action." Eli looked between them, overwhelmed. His entire life had been defined by limitations. What they couldn't afford, couldn't do, couldn't hope for. And now this stranger was offering to sweep those limitations away with a casual wave of his hand. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Eli said finally. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "When you get to my age, Eli, you start to evaluate your legacy. I've built a successful company. I've accumulated wealth, but I've never had a family. No children to pass my knowledge to." He paused, something wistful crossing his features. "Perhaps I see in you something of the son I never had." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "You don't even know me," Eli pointed out. "I know enough," Harrison countered. "I know you stopped to help a stranger when others would have walked by. I know you gave your only protection from the rain to someone who needed it more. I know you have talent and dreams but face obstacles that have nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with circumstance." He leaned forward. "Am I wrong?" Eli couldn't find the words to answer. Everything Harrison said was true, yet it felt impossible that his life could change so dramatically because of one rainy afternoon. "You don't have to decide right now," Harrison said, seeming to sense his uncertainty. "Take a few days to think about it. The offer stands regardless." When they left the hospital an hour later, Eli's head was spinning. The town car waited to take them home, a tangible reminder that he'd somehow stepped into another reality. "What do you think?" his mother asked as they rode in silence through the city streets. Eli stared out the window at the passing buildings. "It seems too good to be true." Lisa squeezed his hand. I had the same thought, but I did some research on my phone while you were in the cafeteria. Harrison Wells has a reputation for philanthropy, particularly educational initiatives. And the way he looked at you, she trailed off. What? She smiled softly, like he saw something special. The way I've always seen you. Eli turned back to the window, blinking rapidly against unexpected tears. For so long he'd felt invisible, or worse, visible only as a target. The idea that someone like Harrison Wells might see value in him was almost too much to comprehend. As the car turned onto their street, Eli made his decision. I want to do it, he said. The internship, everything. His mother's smile widened. I had a feeling you'd say that. The transformation began almost immediately. 3 days after their hospital visit, Eli was called to the principal's office. He arrived expecting the usual indifference to his situation. Instead, he found Principal Gonzalez uncharacteristically attentive, even nervous. Eli, I want to personally apologize for the situation with Jason Wheeler and his friends. The principal began, adjusting his tie. We've failed to adequately address your concerns, and that's unacceptable. Stunned, Eli could only nod. I've had some conversations with the school board and Wheeler's parents. Gonzalez continued. Jason and the others have been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing, and we'll be implementing a new anti-bullying program immediately. That afternoon, Jason Wheeler and his crew were conspicuously absent. When they returned to school the following week, they gave Eli a wide berth, not even making eye contact. Eli never asked Harrison exactly what pressure in the right places had entailed. Some things he decided were better left unknown. The internship began the following Monday. A town car, Thomas again, picked Eli up after school and drove him to the gleaming Wells Innovations headquarters on the waterfront. The 30-story glass tower seemed to touch the clouds, its architecture both imposing and graceful. Margaret met him in the lobby, her severe expression softened slightly by what might have been approval. Mr. Wells wanted to greet you personally, she explained as she led him to a private elevator. But he's still recovering at home. He asked me to show you to the design department and make sure you're settled in. The elevator whisked them to the 23rd floor, where the doors opened onto a space unlike anything Eli had ever seen. The design department was a vast open area filled with natural light, drawing tables, computer stations, and what appeared to be a full fabrication lab behind glass walls. Models and prototypes lined the walls, ranging from medical devices to what looked like components for renewable energy systems. A tall, bearded man in his 30s approached with an easy smile. You must be Eli. I'm Daniel Reeves, head of industrial design. Harrison has told me all about you. Eli shook his hand nervously. Nice to meet you. We're all looking forward to working with you. Daniel continued, gesturing around the room where several designers had paused their work to observe the new arrival. Harrison doesn't usually take a personal interest in our hiring process, so you've got everyone curious. Eli felt his face heat up. I don't really know why he's doing all this. Daniel studied him for a moment. Harrison is an excellent judge of character and potential. If he sees something in you, it's there. He clapped Eli on the shoulder. Now let me show you your station. My station? Eli echoed, following Daniel through the workspace. Every designer needs their own space. Daniel explained, stopping before a drawing table and computer set up by the windows. This is yours. Eli stared in disbelief. The station was equipped with professional-grade equipment, a top-of-the-line computer, digital drawing tablet, and an array of traditional materials. Pencils, markers, and sketchbooks of a quality he'd only dreamed of owning were arranged neatly in drawers. This is for me? He managed. Daniel nodded. Harrison was quite specific about the setup. Said you'd lost your materials recently and would need replacements. Eli ran his fingers lightly over a leather-bound sketchbook, its pages thick and pristine. The simple gesture of replacing what had been destroyed felt more personal than even the internship itself. Thank you, he whispered, though Harrison wasn't there to hear it. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Eli's life. School in the mornings, now mercifully free of bullying, followed by afternoons at Wells Innovations 3 days a week. Weekends were split between homework and helping his mother, who had been able to reduce her hours at the diner thanks to Eli's internship salary. The work itself was challenging and exhilarating. Daniel started Eli with basic tasks, redrawing existing designs, shadowing team members, learning the computer programs. But he quickly recognized Eli's natural talent and began assigning him more substantive projects. 1 month into his internship, Eli still hadn't seen Harrison again. The CEO was recovering at his home, according to Margaret, but sent regular inquiries about Eli's progress. He'd like you to visit this weekend, Margaret informed Eli one Thursday afternoon as he was preparing to leave. Saturday, if that's convenient. The car will pick you up at 10. Eli felt a flutter of nervousness. Is everything okay? Margaret's expression softened slightly. He's eager to see how you're settling in. And I think he's been a bit lonely during his recovery. The thought of Harrison Wells, powerful CEO and technological innovator, being lonely was strangely humanizing. Eli remembered the vulnerable man in the rain and nodded. I'll be ready. Harrison's home was not what Eli had expected. Given the man's wealth and status, Eli had imagined a mansion with imposing gates and manicured grounds. Instead, Thomas drove him to a modern but relatively modest house perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, about 30 minutes outside the city. The structure was primarily glass and natural wood, seeming to blend into the surrounding landscape rather than dominate it. A housekeeper greeted Eli at the door and led him through an airy, open-concept living area to a back deck that stretched the length of the house. Harrison sat in a comfortable chair facing the ocean, a light blanket over his legs despite the mild weather. He looked thinner than Eli remembered, his face more lined, but his eyes brightened when he saw his visitor. Eli, he said warmly, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. Eli shook his hand, noting the slight tremor in the older man's grip. Are you feeling better? Some days are better than others. Harrison replied with a wry smile. Please sit. Would you like something to drink? Mrs. Chen makes an excellent lemonade. They settled into a companionable silence for a few minutes, sipping lemonade and watching seagulls wheel above the waves below. Eli found himself relaxing despite his initial nervousness. Daniel tells me you're exceeding all expectations, Harrison said finally. He showed me your concept drawings for the portable dialysis system. Remarkable work, especially for someone your age. Eli ducked his head, uncomfortable with the praise but pleased nonetheless. The team has been really helpful. I'm learning a lot. And what about school? Any further issues with those boys? No, Eli said, still amazed by the transformation. They won't even look at me now. Whatever you did, Harrison waved a dismissive hand. Sometimes people need to be reminded of potential consequences. Their parents are all connected to businesses that have relationships with Wells Innovations. A word in the right ear can be very effective. There was something steely beneath Harrison's casual tone, a glimpse of the ruthless businessman beneath the grandfatherly exterior. Eli wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of Harrison wielding his influence on his behalf, but he couldn't deny the relief of attending school without fear. I brought something to show you, Eli said, changing the subject. He pulled out his new sketchbook and opened it to recent drawings, concepts for devices he'd been developing under Daniel's guidance. Harrison leaned forward, examining the sketches with genuine interest. His questions were incisive, pushing Eli to explain his thinking and consider alternatives. Before long, they were deep in conversation about design principles and engineering challenges. The initial awkwardness completely forgotten. You have a natural intuition for this, Harrison remarked, tapping one particularly innovative design. You see problems from angles others miss. My mom says it's because I've always had to find workarounds, Eli admitted. When you can't afford the standard solution, you get creative. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Necessity as the mother of invention. It served you well. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Tell me about your father, Eli. The abrupt change of subject caught Eli off guard. There's not much to tell. He left when I was 11. We haven't heard from him since. I'm sorry, Harrison said, and he seemed to mean it. That must have been difficult for both you and your mother. Eli shrugged, trying to appear more nonchalant than he felt. We manage. Yes, you do, Harrison agreed quietly. Admirably so. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Books they'd both enjoyed, music, Eli's favorite subjects at school. Harrison proved to be surprisingly well-versed in contemporary culture for a man of his age, though his tastes ran more classical than Eli's. As the afternoon wore on, Eli noticed Harrison growing tired, his responses coming more slowly, his posture slumping slightly. I should probably head back, Eli said, reluctant but concerned. You need to rest. Harrison looked disappointed but didn't argue. Perhaps you could visit again next weekend? Bring your mother if she'd like to come. I'd like that, Eli said, realizing he meant it. Despite the vast differences in their lives, he found Harrison's company engaging and oddly comfortable. As Thomas prepared to drive him home, Harrison pressed something into Eli's hand. A small flat box wrapped in simple blue paper. A small token, Harrison explained. Open it when you get home. Eli waited until he was back in his bedroom to unwrap the gift. Inside the box lay a fountain pen of obvious quality and expense. The sleek black instrument felt perfectly balanced in his hand, with Harrison's initials engraved in silver on the cap. A handwritten note accompanied it, "For sketching your future. It served me well. May it do the same for you. H.W." Eli ran his fingers over the smooth surface of the pen, oddly moved by the personal nature of the gift. Not something bought for the occasion, but an object of significance to Harrison himself. That night, he used the pen to sketch Harrison as he'd seen him that day, gazing out at the ocean, a complex mixture of strength and frailty in his posture. The drawing captured something essential about the man that Eli was only beginning to understand. Over the following months, weekend visits to Harrison's seaside home became a regular part of Eli's life. Sometimes his mother joined them, engaging Harrison in conversations about literature and philosophy that revealed a depth to her Eli had never fully appreciated. Other times, Eli went alone, and those visits often involved long discussions about design concepts or Harrison sharing stories from his early career. At Wells Innovations, Eli's responsibilities grew. By spring, he was contributing meaningful work to actual projects, his designs incorporated into prototypes headed for production. His confidence grew alongside his skills, the constant knot of anxiety that had lived in his chest for years gradually loosening. At school, the transformation was equally dramatic. Without the shadow of bullying hanging over him, Eli found himself making friends for the first time since elementary school. His grades, always decent despite his circumstances, improved to the point where his teachers began discussing scholarship possibilities. "You've changed," his mother remarked one evening as they washed dishes together. "You stand taller. Smile more." Eli considered this. "I guess I feel like I have a future now. Something to look forward to." Lisa's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "Harrison has been good for you." "For us," Eli corrected, bumping her shoulder gently with his. The stability of their lives had improved dramatically. His internship salary had allowed them to move to a better apartment, and Lisa had reduced her shifts to pursue online classes toward a teaching credential, a dream she'd abandoned when she became a single mother. What neither of them discussed was the gradual decline in Harrison's health. Each week, Eli noticed small changes: increased fatigue, occasional confusion, a deepening hollowness in the older man's cheeks. Harrison never complained, deflecting questions about his health with practiced ease. But Eli wasn't fooled. In late April, Harrison missed their regular Saturday meeting, with Margaret calling to explain he was under the weather. The following weekend, Eli found him noticeably weaker, requiring a wheelchair for anything beyond short distances. "Just a temporary setback," Harrison insisted, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "The doctors are adjusting my medications." Eli pretended to believe him, but the worry lodged itself in his chest, a constant companion. During his next shift at Wells Innovations, Eli overheard a hushed conversation between Daniel and Margaret. "The board is getting nervous," Daniel was saying. "If Harrison doesn't name a successor soon, he's working on it." Margaret replied tersely, "Give him time. Time may be the one thing he doesn't have." Daniel responded, his voice somber. Eli retreated silently, his heart pounding. He'd suspected Harrison was seriously ill, but hearing it confirmed by others made it terrifyingly real. The following Saturday, he arrived at Harrison's home with a determined expression and a folder of research printouts. "We need to talk about your heart condition," Eli announced without preamble as soon as they were settled on the deck. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Hello to you too." "I'm serious," Eli persisted. "I've been researching experimental treatments. There's a clinic in Switzerland working on regenerative therapies for cardiac tissue, and a research program at Johns Hopkins using modified stem cells that's showing promising results." Harrison's expression softened. "Eli, money isn't an issue for you," Eli continued, pushing forward before he lost his nerve. "And Wells Innovations has connections in medical research. There has to be something." "Eli," Harrison interrupted more firmly. "Stop!" Eli fell silent, his throat tight with emotion. Harrison reached over and took the folder, setting it aside without looking at it. "My condition is more complicated than you realize. It's not just my heart. There are other factors." "What factors?" Eli demanded. Harrison sighed heavily. "A rare form of blood cancer. Very aggressive. It was in remission for years, but it's returned, and it's affecting my heart function." The words hit Eli like a physical blow. "But there are treatments. Chemotherapy, bone marrow transplants. All of which I've tried," Harrison said gently. "Multiple times. My body won't respond anymore." He leaned forward, fixing Eli with an intense gaze. "I've made my peace with this, Eli. I've had a good life. Successful beyond anything I could have imagined as a young man. But you can't just give up. Eli protested, his voice cracking. It's not giving up to accept what cannot be changed. Harrison replied, it's wisdom. Tears burned behind Eli's eyes. In less than a year, this man had become a central figure in his life. Mentor, benefactor, and something approaching family. The thought of losing him was unbearable. What can I do? Eli asked finally, hating how small his voice sounded. Harrison reached out and gripped Eli's hand with surprising strength. You can continue becoming the extraordinary young man I know you are. You can use your talent to create things that matter. And you can visit an old man regularly enough that he doesn't get too maudlin sitting here alone. Eli managed a watery smile. I can do that. Good, Harrison said, releasing his hand. Now tell me about that housing concept you mentioned last week. The modular design for disaster relief. And so they continued as before, discussing designs and ideas, pretending that time wasn't slipping away with each labored breath Harrison took. Summer arrived with blazing heat and cloudless skies. Eli, now working full-time at Wells Innovations during school break, found himself taking on increasingly significant responsibilities. Daniel had become a mentor in his own right, guiding Eli through the complexities of professional design work while giving him space to develop his own creative voice. Harrison, meanwhile, had become virtually housebound. His weekend visits with Eli continued, but they were shorter now, often punctuated by periods when Harrison needed to rest. Sometimes they simply sat in companionable silence, watching the ocean and listening to the classical music Harrison favored. In late July, Harrison asked Eli to come on a Wednesday evening, rather than their usual Saturday. When Eli arrived, he found Harrison dressed more formally than usual, sitting in his wheelchair by the large picture window in the living room. I hope I didn't disrupt your plans, Harrison said as Eli took a seat across from him. No plans to disrupt, Eli assured him. Is everything okay? Harrison nodded. I wanted to discuss something important with you. A proposition of sorts. Eli waited, a sense of foreboding creeping up his spine. As you're aware, my health is deteriorating, Harrison began, his voice steady despite the difficult subject. My doctors estimate I have perhaps 3 months, possibly less. Though Eli had suspected as much, hearing it stated so plainly made his chest constrict painfully. Harrison, the older man held up a hand. Please let me finish. This isn't easy for me either. Eli nodded, swallowing hard. I've been making arrangements, Harrison continued, for the company, for my personal affairs, and I've been giving a great deal of thought to my legacy. He paused, his blue eyes intent on Eli's face. You know I never married, never had children? Yes, Eli said quietly. What you don't know is why. Harrison's gaze drifted to the window, to the ocean beyond. There was someone once, Eliza. We were engaged to be married when we were both very young. Before Wells Innovations, before my success, she died in a car accident 3 weeks before our wedding. I'm so sorry, Eli murmured, stunned by this glimpse into Harrison's past. After Eliza, I threw myself into my work, built the company, expanded it, became the man you see today. A ghost of a smile touched Harrison's lips. Or rather, the man I was before this illness took hold. He turned back to Eli. I never sought another relationship. Perhaps that was a mistake. But the point is, I have no direct heirs, no family to whom I can leave my legacy. A heavy silence fell between them. Eli had a sense of where this conversation was heading, but it seemed too incredible to contemplate. I've come to care for you deeply, Eli, Harrison said finally. These past months, watching you grow and develop your talents, have been among the most rewarding of my life. In many ways, you've become the son I never had. Eli felt tears threatening again, but blinked them back. What I'm trying to say, Harrison continued, is that I would like to legally adopt you. The words hung in the air, impossible and overwhelming. Adopt me? Eli repeated, certain he'd misheard. But I'm 16, almost 17. The law allows for the adoption of minors until they turn 18, Harrison explained. And given my condition, expedited processing is possible. He leaned forward. This isn't a decision I've made lightly, Eli. Nor is it one you should accept without careful consideration. Does my mom know about this? Eli asked, his mind racing. Harrison nodded. I spoke with Lisa yesterday. She gave her blessing, though she emphasized that the choice must be entirely yours. I don't understand what this would mean, Eli admitted. Would I live here? Change my name? Those details would be up to you, Harrison said. You could continue living with your mother if you prefer. As for your name, you could keep Parker, take Wells, or hyphenate the two. What's important is what the adoption represents legally and personally, which is, Eli prompted. Legally, it would make you my heir, Harrison explained. You would inherit my estate, my shares in Wells Innovations, everything. Eli felt lightheaded. The magnitude of what Harrison was suggesting was beyond comprehension. Personally, Harrison continued more softly. It would formalize what I already feel. That you are family to me, Eli. Son of my heart, if not my blood. Eli stared at his hands, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. You don't need to answer now, Harrison assured him. Take time to think about it. Discuss it with your mother. This is a profound decision that will affect the rest of your life. Can I ask you something? Eli said, looking up. Of course. Why me? The question that had lurked in the back of Eli's mind since that rainy day in the park finally emerged. Out of all the people you could have chosen, why me? Harrison considered the question seriously. There's no simple answer to that. Part of it was timing, meeting you when I did, when my own mortality was becoming impossible to ignore. Part of it was seeing your talent, your potential being wasted through circumstances beyond your control. He paused. But mostly, it was who you revealed yourself to be in that park. A young man with every reason to be bitter and self-focused, yet who stopped to help a stranger. Who gave his only jacket to someone who, by all outward appearances, needed it far less than he did. Harrison's eyes grew distant. I've known many brilliant people in my life, Eli. Many ambitious, talented individuals. But genuine kindness, true compassion, those are far rarer qualities and infinitely more valuable. Eli didn't know how to respond to that. The simple act that had changed his life had seemed so small at the time, hardly worth mentioning. Think about it, Harrison said gently. We can talk more when you're ready. On the drive home, Eli stared out the window without seeing the passing scenery. His mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Adoption, inheritance, a dying man's legacy. His mother was waiting up when he arrived home, her expression anxious. He told you? Eli nodded, sinking onto the couch beside her. Did you know he was going to do this? Not until yesterday, Lisa admitted. He called me to discuss it first, to make sure I wouldn't object. And you don't? Eli searched his mother's face. It's huge, Mom. Lisa took his hands in hers. Honey, what Harrison is offering you is beyond anything I could have dreamed for your future. Security, opportunity, a chance to fully develop your talents without the limitations we've always faced. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. How could I possibly object to that? But it feels like Eli struggled to articulate the complex emotions churning within him. Like I'd be replacing Dad, or like I'm being disloyal to you somehow. Oh, Eli. Lisa pulled him into a hug. You could never replace your father, and Harrison isn't trying to. As for being disloyal to me, she pulled back to look him in the eyes. All I've ever wanted is for you to have the chances I couldn't give you. To see you become the incredible man I know you can be. This doesn't change our relationship. I'll always be your mother. Eli leaned into her embrace, drawing comfort from her steadiness. Well, what would you do? If you were me? Lisa was quiet for a long moment. I can't answer that for you, honey. This is your decision, your life. But I will say this. Harrison Wells is offering you not just his fortune, but his name, his legacy. That speaks to how deeply he cares for you, how much he believes in you. Eli nodded against her shoulder, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Sleep on it, Lisa advised, stroking his hair as she had when he was small. Things often seem clearer in the morning. But morning brought no easy answers. Eli moved through the following days in a daze, turning Harrison's offer over and over in his mind. At Wells Innovations, he found himself studying the employees with new eyes, wondering if they knew what Harrison was planning, how they would react to a teenager suddenly becoming a major shareholder in the company. By Friday, he'd made his decision. He called Harrison and asked to visit the following day. When he arrived, Harrison was sitting on the deck as usual, but there was a tension in his posture that betrayed his anxiety about Eli's answer. Eli took his customary seat, gathering his thoughts before speaking. I've been thinking about what you said, about legacy. Harrison nodded, waiting. My whole life, I felt like I was less than the other kids at school with their nice clothes and vacations. Less than what my mom deserved after everything she sacrificed for me. Less than what I could be if things were different. Eli looked out at the ocean, drawing strength from its vastness. Then you came along and saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You gave me opportunities I never thought I'd have. He turned back to Harrison. I want to say yes to your offer, But not because of the money or the inheritance. Because, he swallowed hard, because in some weird way it feels right. Like we were supposed to meet that day in the park. Harrison's eyes brightened with emotion. I feel the same way, Eli, but I have conditions. Eli continued, surprising himself with his boldness. Harrison's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Go on. First, I want to keep my last name and add yours. Eli Parker Wells. He took a deep breath. Second, I want to make sure my mom is taken care of. Not just while I'm in college, but for the rest of her life. She deserves to pursue her own dreams. Of course, Harrison agreed immediately. I'd already planned for that. And third, Eli continued, I want to establish a foundation for kids like me with talent but without resources. A program that identifies them early and gives them the chances I almost didn't get. Harrison's expression softened into something like pride. Those are excellent conditions and I accept them all. In fact, I can't think of a better use for a portion of my estate than the foundation you've proposed. Eli felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Then yes, I accept your offer. Harrison extended his hand, and Eli took it, the handshake sealing their agreement more profoundly than any legal document could. My lawyers will begin the process immediately, Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. Given the circumstances, they believe it can be finalized within a month. Eli nodded, still somewhat dazed by the magnitude of what they were undertaking. What happens after? With the company, I mean. You'll inherit my controlling interest in Wells Innovations, Harrison explained. But you won't be expected to run it immediately, of course. The current executive team will continue day-to-day operations while you complete your education. Margaret and Daniel will serve as your advisors. He smiled slightly. Though I suspect you'll have your own ideas about the company's direction even before you graduate college. The casual way Harrison spoke about a future he wouldn't see made Eli's throat tighten. I wish you had more time, he said softly. Harrison's expression grew contemplative. Time is a curious thing, Eli. We never know how much we have, only how we choose to use what we're given. He reached out to grip Eli's shoulder. I'm using mine exactly as I wish, ensuring that what I've built continues in hands I trust. Your hands. The adoption was finalized on a clear September morning, 3 weeks before Eli's 17th birthday. The judge, understanding the urgency of Harrison's condition, had expedited the process. The ceremony itself was simple. Just Eli, Harrison, Lisa, and the necessary legal representatives gathered in Harrison's living room. As Eli signed the final document that legally made him Harrison Wells' son and heir, he felt a strange mixture of emotions, joy at the formalization of their bond, grief at the knowledge of how little time they would have together, and a deep sense of responsibility for the legacy he was inheriting. Harrison, seated in his wheelchair, looked more frail than ever, but his eyes shone with satisfaction as he watched Eli complete the signature. Eli Parker Wells, he said, testing the name. It suits you. In the weeks that followed, Harrison's decline accelerated. By early October, he had been moved to a hospital bed in his home, with round-the-clock nursing care. Despite his weakening condition, he insisted on continuing his conversations with Eli, though they were shorter now and often punctuated by long silences when Harrison needed to rest. On a stormy Friday evening, reminiscent of the day they'd first met almost exactly 1 year earlier, Margaret called Eli at home. You should come, she said simply. Bring your mother if you can. They arrived to find Harrison conscious, but barely so. His breathing labored, his once sharp blue eyes clouded with medication and pain. Eli, he whispered when he saw them, attempting to raise a hand that barely lifted from the bedsheet. Eli moved to his bedside, gently taking Harrison's hand in his. I'm here. Harrison's gaze shifted to Lisa, who stood just behind her son. Thank you, he murmured, for raising such a remarkable young man, for sharing him with me. Lisa wiped away tears. Thank you for seeing what I always saw in him. Harrison's attention returned to Eli, his grip tightening slightly. The pen, he whispered. Did you bring it? Eli nodded, pulling Harrison's fountain pen from his pocket. He'd taken to carrying it everywhere. A ghost of a smile touched Harrison's lips. Good. Keep it with you. Remember, he paused, gathering strength. Remember that everything valuable begins with a single line, a single choice. Eli nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. I'm proud of you. Harrison continued, each word clearly an effort. Of who you are, of who you'll become. I'll make you proud, Eli promised, his voice breaking. I'll make it all matter. Harrison nodded faintly. I know you will. His eyes drifted closed. I'm tired now, but I'll see you. Tomorrow. They both knew it was unlikely, but Eli nodded anyway. Tomorrow. He agreed. Harrison Wells died peacefully in his sleep that night, with Eli and Lisa keeping vigil beside him. As dawn broke over the ocean outside his window, the man who had transformed their lives with a single chance encounter slipped away. The funeral was a larger affair than Eli had expected. Harrison, despite his reserved nature, had touched many lives through his innovations and philanthropy. Business leaders, researchers, politicians, and former employees filled the seaside chapel to capacity. Eli, seated in the front row between his mother and Margaret, felt strangely detached from the proceedings. The eulogies painted a picture of Harrison Wells, the visionary, the businessman, the philanthropist, but they couldn't capture the man Eli had come to know. The one who sat watching the ocean for hours, who laughed at Eli's awkward jokes, who shared his own failures and doubts in quiet evening conversations. When it came time for Eli to speak, he approached the podium slowly, the weight of Harrison's fountain pen in his pocket, a tangible reminder of everything that had changed. Most of you knew Harrison Wells longer than I did. He began, his voice steadier than he'd expected. I only had the privilege of knowing him for a year, but in that year, he changed everything for me. Eli paused, looking out at the sea of faces. You've heard today about Harrison's accomplishments, his innovations, his generosity. Those things matter. They're part of his legacy, but they're not all of it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the fountain pen, holding it up. Harrison gave me this pen. It was his, the one he used to sketch his first designs to sign his first contracts. He told me that everything valuable begins with a single line, a single choice. Eli looked down at the pen in his hand. A year ago, I made a choice to help a stranger in the rain. Harrison made a choice to see something in me worth nurturing. Those simple choices changed both our lives. He looked up again, meeting the gaze of those gathered. Harrison Wells wasn't just a brilliant innovator or a successful businessman. He was a man who understood that true legacy isn't measured in patents or profits, but in the lives we touch, the potential we help unlock in others. Eli's voice finally broke. I'm honored to carry his name, to continue his work, and to live by the example he set, that a single act of kindness can transform a life. That's the legacy I inherit today, and the one I promise to extend to others. The weeks following the funeral passed in a blur of legal meetings, press inquiries, and adjustments to Eli's new reality. As Harrison's adopted son and heir, he found himself thrust into a spotlight he'd never sought nor prepared for. The terms of Harrison's will surprised even Eli with their scope and thoughtfulness. Beyond the substantial personal inheritance and controlling interest in Wells' innovations, Harrison had established trust for both Eli's education and Lisa's future. He had also laid the groundwork for the foundation Eli had proposed, allocating significant resources to its establishment. Most touching to Eli was a private letter Harrison had written to him, to be delivered after his death. In it, Harrison expressed not only his affection for Eli, but his absolute confidence in the young man's ability to carry forward his legacy while forging his own path. You came into my life when I had resigned myself to leaving nothing behind but a company and a fortune, Harrison had written. You gave me the gift of knowing that my values, my beliefs about what matters most in this world, will continue. That is a far greater legacy than anything else I've built. As winter approached, Eli and his mother moved into Harrison's seaside home. The initial plan had been to sell it, but neither could bear to part with the place where they had come to know Harrison best. Instead, they made it their own while preserving elements of his presence. His books still lined the shelves, his classical records remained in their cabinet, his favorite chair still faced the ocean. At Wells Innovations, Eli continued his internship, now with the understanding that he was working in the company he would one day lead. Daniel and Margaret served as his mentors and protectors, shielding him from the corporate politics that inevitably arose when a teenager became the largest shareholder of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. His schoolmates, who had once either bullied or ignored him, now regarded him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Eli found he had little patience for those who suddenly wanted to be his friend. Instead, he focused on his studies, his work at the company, and the small circle of genuine relationships he'd developed over the past year. 1 year to the day after meeting Harrison in the rain, Eli returned to the park bench where it had all begun. The weather was remarkably similar, overcast and drizzly, with a chill in the air that hinted at the coming winter. He sat on the bench, Harrison's fountain pen in hand, and opened a leather-bound sketchbook, not unlike the one that had been destroyed by bullies a lifetime ago. For a long time, he simply sat, watching joggers pass and listening to the rain patter on the leaves overhead. Then slowly he began to draw, not designs for devices or systems, but a portrait of Harrison as he remembered him best. sitting on his deck, watching the ocean, a look of peaceful contemplation on his face. As he drew, Eli reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. From a bullied teen with limited prospects to the heir of a technological empire. From a boy who felt perpetually alone to a young man surrounded by people who believed in his potential. All because of a simple choice to help a stranger in the rain. When the sketch was complete, Eli closed the book and looked up at the park around him. Somewhere, perhaps on this very path, another life-changing encounter might be taking place. Another simple act of kindness might be setting in motion events that would transform lives. The thought brought a smile to his face as he stood and headed home, to the house by the sea that had once belonged to Harrison Wells and now belonged to him, to the future that had once seemed impossibly distant and now stretched before him, full of promise and possibility. Eli Parker Wells walked through the rain, Harrison's pen secure in his pocket, no longer fearing what lay ahead but embracing it, just as Harrison had taught him to do.